an empire of millions stretched along the spine of the Andes, from coastal deserts to high mountain valleys, across terrain so steep and unforgiving that even a short journey could become an ordeal. Its rulers demanded labor and goods, moved armies, filled storehouses, organized labor, and kept track of communities scattered across thousands of miles. And they did it all without a conventional writing system. So how did the Inca make their vast empire legible? How could officials know who owed labor, which storehouses held maize, or how many soldiers could be summoned from a distant province? Part of the answer could be carried in one hand: the quipu. At first glance, a quipu looks like a bundle of cords, a main line with pendant strings hanging beneath it, sometimes branching into smaller cords. But look closer, and a carefully structured system appears. Knots could encode numbers. Their position helped mark units, tens, hundreds, and more. Colors, cord direction, spacing, and branches may have encoded categories or other information, although many non-numeric features remain incompletely understood. In the hands of trained specialists, these were not loose strings. They were records, tools for counting people, tracking labor obligations and goods, managing supplies, and transmitting information through an empire bound together by roads, runners, and state officials. The Inca tied administration into knots, and through those knots, they turned distant villages, harvests, workers, armies, and warehouses into information the state could see and act upon. This is the hidden engine of the Inca Empire, a state information system carried and interpreted by specialists that helped govern without a conventional alphabetic writing system. But the real power of the quipu did not lie in the knots alone. It lay in the network behind them. Across the empire, trained officials known as quipucamayoc, keepers of the quipu, turned the life of communities into organized information. They recorded populations by age and status, counted herds and harvests, tracked goods owed as tribute, and noted the labor each household was expected to provide. That labor was essential. Instead of collecting taxes primarily in money, the Inca state demanded time and work, tending state fields, building roads, serving in armies, mining, weaving cloth, or transporting supplies. Quipucamayoc helped officials calculate who owed what, and whether those obligations had been fulfilled. The same system reached into the empire's vast storehouses. Maize, potatoes, dried meat, textiles, weapons, sandals, and tools were counted as they entered and left. In good years, these warehouses accumulated reserves. In times of war, crop failure, or disaster, their contents could be redirected to soldiers, labor crews, or communities in need. But how did figures recorded in a distant valley reach the imperial capital? Through movement. Local information passed upward through layers of administration, while runners, known as chasquis, carried messages along the Capac-Ñan, the immense imperial road system. Relay stations allowed one runner to hand information to the next, moving reports across terrain that no single messenger could cross quickly alone. A chasqui might carry a quipu, but the cord was only part of the message. Its meaning also depended on trained people who understood its categories, its arrangement, and the circumstances in which it had been made. At the receiving end, another official could inspect, interpret, compare, and sometimes consolidate its figures into a new record. So a census was not simply tied once and sent to Cusco. Information could be gathered household by household, summarized at the village level, combined within a province, and passed onward through an administrative hierarchy. Each stage compressed local reality into numbers the state could use. That made the quipu less like a solitary document and more like a node in a living information system. Its cords connected farmers to local headmen to provincial administrators, administrators to storehouse managers and labor overseers, and all of them, ultimately, to Cusco. Roads carried the records. Messengers supplied speed. Officials supplied memory, interpretation, and authority. Without those people, the knots were silent. Without the roads, their information remained local. Without storehouses, censuses, and labor organization, there was little for the state to coordinate. Together, however, they allowed rulers in Cusco to see, imperfectly but at extraordinary scale, what resources existed, where workers could be summoned, and which regions could supply food, cloth, or troops. The hidden engine was not the Quipu by itself. It was the chain of human beings who tied, carried, read, checked, and acted upon it. A network stretching from individual communities across the Andes to the center of the Inca world. When the Spanish conquered the Andes, they did more than overthrow an empire. They disrupted the human network that made the Quipu intelligible. Quipucamayoc were displaced or absorbed into a new colonial order. Storehouses and administrative chains were reorganized, while European officials increasingly imposed alphabetic records. Even so, specialists continued producing and reading Quipu under Spanish rule, in administration, legal disputes, and some Andean communities. Before that, institutional knowledge declined unevenly over generations. Many chords survived, and Quipu use continued during the colonial period. But over generations, much of the institutional knowledge around them was disrupted or lost. That is why the Quipu remains so difficult to understand. Researchers can often recognize quantities, numerical patterns, and signs of careful classification. Some Quipu may have carried information beyond accounting, perhaps names, histories, obligations, or narratives. But without an unbroken community of readers, much of that meaning remains uncertain. The knots are still there. The knowledge needed to open them is largely gone. It is tempting to see this uncertainty as proof that Quipu were primitive, an ingenious calculator perhaps, but not a true system of knowledge. Yet that judgment begins with a hidden assumption, that complex information must ultimately resemble writing as we know it. The Inca built their state around a different possibility. Information could be carried in fiber. Number could be expressed through position and knot. Color, material, spacing, and structure may have encoded categories or other information, though many non-numeric meanings remain debated. Meaning did not have to sit silently on a page. It could be handled, recited, checked, and interpreted by trained specialists within a living institution. Was the Quipu writing? Perhaps the better question is, what kinds of knowledge can a civilization organize without an alphabet? The surviving chords do not give us a complete answer. They give us evidence of a lost one, a system sophisticated enough to help govern millions of people across one of the most difficult landscapes on Earth, yet different enough from European record-keeping that much of its logic became obscured as colonial institutions displaced the empire that had sustained it. The Quipu asks us to imagine administration without paper, archives without books, and memory built not from lines of ink, but from relationships, cord to cord, keeper to keeper, community to state. An empire was tied into those relationships. As the network was disrupted, more of the chords fell silent. But they did not become meaningless. They remain evidence that alphabetic writing is not the only path to complexity, and that history may contain entire systems of thought we have mistaken for mysteries simply because we no longer know how to read them.